Welcome to this series of 4 rugby coaching videos called the Rugby Workshops, which build the season progressively for both coaches and players. But what makes a successful rugby coach, or a successful team, or an individual or group of players who go on to realise every schoolboy's ambition to become an international rugby player? Success can be measured in many different ways. Winning is one way, but so is the amount of enjoyment that players and coaches gain from effective preparation and participation. What most players and coaches agree on is that rugby is a complex and ever-changing game. This is why the Rugby Workshops will give you that extra edge when it comes to coaching rugby. This revolutionary new method of coaching looks at new areas and techniques, the methods you will need to meet the challenges of a constantly changing game. You will be able to keep way ahead of rival players, teams and coaches. The 4 videos in this series are introduced and presented by some of rugby's most expert and influential coaches and personalities. Here's John Hart, former All Black and Auckland coach, to explain why the coach must also be the major role model for his players.
Coaching is a tremendous experience. I simply see the role of a coach as creating the environment where the individuals and the team as a whole can achieve their maximum potential. There's nothing better than the end of a day, end of a match, end of a planning session, or end of a season to look back and say, we achieved what we set out to do. So how does a coach achieve this? In my mind, you achieve it by being an effective planner, setting out the season's requirements, setting out the requirements for each training session, for each match, by being well organized, by having a good team around you to support. And don't forget, there are a lot of people out there that would like to help. So maybe someone out there can be a good manager, someone who's a good assistant coach, but you need to involve others if you want to create the right environment. Don't take it all on yourself. The coach then needs to select the team well, to induct the players into the team, to have a clear game plan, to ensure that all the members of a team understand the role of a team and the requirements of the individuals within it. You need to have a good captain. Need to ensure that players feel good about themselves. Motivation is a word that's used a lot, but in my view, the motivation required to be a successful rugby player or rugby team is self-motivation. So the role of a coach is to make people feel good about themselves so they can go out then and achieve their potential and what the team requires. When people say that you have to be an effective selector, man manager, psychologist, planner, organizer, it might put us off. But all it takes really is common sense. Because I'm sure from my own experiences that if you have a common sense approach to coaching, it's easy. Rugby is a team game. More than anything else, it requires discipline and it requires standards. And the standards have to be set by the coach. In my time, whether I was dealing with the All Blacks or a club side, I had 3 simple standards that I asked the team to perform. One was timekeeping, one was dress, and one was foul play. I believe if you have a team that is on time, dresses well, and abides by the rules, you have set the fundamentals that you require to build a winning team. So setting the standards comes from you, the coach. Because when you compromise the standards, when you let the team down, where do they go and who do they follow? You are their role model. And role models must be people that are looked up to. So, don't be late. Make sure that when you get to training, you know what you want to achieve. You know what you want to communicate, so that the players come to training and then understand what you are after. Dress. Quite simple, really. If you're going to have a team play like a team, they have to look like a team and feel like a team. Foul play. I think foul play has no place in the game. And I think it's in the hands of us, the coaches, to control that, to set the standard, to tell the team that you will not compromise the requirement to play within the rules. And if someone transgresses that, you've got to be prepared to take action, or otherwise you compromise the team as a whole. A team will not be able to perform to its potential unless you have a clear game plan, unless backs and forwards both know what is required, that everyone knows the calls, that everyone knows the moves, that every individual within the team understands their role within it. So that takes time. You've got to spend some time on a blackboard, taking the team through it, defence and attack. And whilst talking about defence and attack, you know, I go along to a lot of training runs and watch teams train, and they're in the perfect game because they're always attacking, because they've always got the ball. You must practice defence as much as you practice attack, because there's no point in scoring tries and then conceding them because you haven't got an effective defence pattern. Don't underestimate the importance of preparation. Preparation before a match, before a training run. Don't underestimate the need to practice self-analysis. After a training run, come away and say, now, did I achieve what I set out to? Did I do what I should have done to help the team achieve our aims? And training, to me, is the most important aspect that a coach has to implement. Training sessions have to be well planned. You have to know before you come to training what you want to achieve. Then you have to communicate it. I'd urge you to keep training short and sharp. There's nothing worse than long, drawn-out training runs. I'd urge you to use balls to ensure that you develop ball skills. Training runs are not fitness runs. Individuals have got to do their bit away from the training field on fitness. But don't underestimate the importance of grid work, of ball skills at speed to enhance the fitness levels. I had a simple philosophy as a coach: train as we play and play as we train. And I think one of the most important things you can do as a coach is to enforce the disciplines upon the team, self-discipline it becomes, not to make mistakes at training, to communicate, to make sure you do all the things that are going to be required when you go out on the field. Because I'm sure that a team that trains well will play well. Play as you train as you play. Variety and fun are important aspects of that. Nothing worse than coming along to training knowing what to expect all the time. Make sure you create an environment where people have fun. Make sure as you train you encourage people, you support them. You know, at the end of the day, we all like to go away feeling good about ourselves. If you can leave the training run with 21 or 22 players in a squad, feeling good about the training run, feeling good about themselves, you've done a lot as you step towards the motivational requirements of the game. The choice of your captain is very important. When you're coaching kids, captaincy can be shared around. That's not a bad thing in itself. It encourages young players, gives them a feeling of self-esteem. But as you're growing and as you're going through the stages of development into teenage rugby and beyond, your captain is critical. And too often we make the mistake of picking the captain who's the best player. You've got to pick the player who has the leadership quality, the player who you know has the respect of a team, who's good at the job, but also is a good communicator and someone who can take the team with him. And you help achieve that by ensuring at training that the captain's voice is heard. You know, it's no use going to training and your voice being the only one that's heard, because come Saturday, it's the captain they have to respond to on the field, not you, the coach, on the sideline. Ensure that you pick a person you are comfortable working with, the team will respond to, and someone that can give the leadership required, which is something very important in a team sport. So don't be daunted by coaching. It's a great challenge. It can be great fun. There's no better reward than to see players performing and enjoying themselves. And if they achieve that, you certainly will achieve your goals.
Setting goals and aspiring to very high standards is what coaching is all about. And John Hart's approach is certainly one that will give you the results you strive for. Few would deny that Grant Fox strived for and set the highest standards and got the results as he rewrote the record books throughout his recent career. Who does the kicking on your team? If you'd like to improve the success rate of your goal kicker and win more matches, who better than the world's greatest exponent?
The sequence I'm going to take you through now is the way I believe that technically a rugby ball needs to be kicked in order for you to be successful. I'm going to teach you to teach yourself. Well, that's what I'm trying to achieve in theory, because in games of rugby, you can't have a coach run onto the field when you've missed a kick and tell you what you've done wrong. You can't stop the game and ask the referee to have it again. You have to ensure that from one kick to the next, you know technically what you are doing. One thing you should be doing here is starting to get a mental picture of what you're trying to achieve. Clearly, that is putting the ball through the goalpost over there somewhere. If you stand the ball straight up and down, as such, at the back of your run-up, back there, you should be watching the contact point. Now, all I do from this point, just before I go in to kick the football, is I say to myself, head down, follow through, which is really saying, watch the ball. If you watch what happens when I pull my left arm away, watch what happens to my head. It gets pulled back and behind the football, which means that your weight's going to be on your heel for a start. So you're kicking from a technically incorrect position.
Teach Yourself to Kick with Grant Fox also covers the art of punting and drop kicking. Grant shows how to master the skills of kicking with step-by-step demonstrations and provides you with the means of analysing and correcting errors. Grant's video is available now by writing or faxing to the producers of this video series. All your training and coaching expertise will come to naught if your young chargers don't heed your advice on building a strong body and mind with the correct diet. What constitutes a healthy diet and how to benefit from the use of carbohydrates and vitamins is explained now by Dr. John Mayhew, the All Blacks team doctor.
I'm often asked by a number of players and coaches, what the ideal diet of a rugby player should be. Unfortunately, there's no magic potion or food. The average rugby player needs to have a well-balanced diet with an emphasis on carbohydrate, and by that I mean plenty of pasta, cereal-type foods, bread, and products like that. I think one of the biggest issues which has changed and the rugby coach and player should be aware of is the need after training or after games to get energy back into the athlete, the rugby player. So if you have a training session or a rugby game, it's important to have some carbohydrate going back into the system after training. The easiest way to do this is to have products like bananas, lepin, or the Hawley's products, which come in little sachets of complex carbohydrates, which enable the body to assimilate this sort of starchy type food into the body and help prevent the breakdown of glycogen from the liver. The reason for doing this is, one, it helps the player recover from the sort of the strenuous aspects of training, and also enables his energy stores to be built up so he's able to train adequately and purposefully the following day. My advice to players is, following a hard training, they should have the equivalent of a couple of bananas, some lepin, or one of the Hawley's products, plenty of fluid, and within an hour or so go home or go back to the hotel or whatever they're doing, and have a decent meal, high in carbohydrates, say mashed potato, pasta, rice, those sorts of things, and replenish the energy stores.
What should players be eating during the week prior to a game?
I think that during the rugby season, really, the diet of the average New Zealand rugby player should have an emphasis on complex carbohydrates. So there's nothing wrong with our red meats and the occasional indulgence like McDonald's and things like that, but the overall diet should be one of plenty of bread, plenty of pasta, plenty of fruit, i.e. a well-balanced diet that our mother would be very proud of, and an adequate intake of vitamins in their natural form. The average New Zealander doesn't need to take any supplements. There's no need for vitamin tablets, injections, pills and potions. The New Zealand diet is high in vitamins and protein, and we need to make sure that we supplement that with a high carbohydrate intake.
In the 48 hours leading up to a game, what should a player be eating?
I think the average player in the build-up to a game needs to experiment themselves and find what foods they can assimilate, because a lot of people, because of their nervous condition or because they're apprehensive at a game, find certain foods don't agree with them. So it's a bit of trial and error, but the sort of foods they should be looking at, especially on the day of the game and the night for the game, the pasta-like dishes, potato dishes, rice dishes, bread dishes, the cereals, and fruit. Obviously supplemented with a good fluid intake during the 24 hours prior to the game, and also immediately prior to the game, and obviously during the game as well.
What should players not be doing in regards to their diet? For example, skipping meals before games?
I think the sort of the basic rules that I'd like to stress to rugby players is they need to sort of have a diet high in carbohydrate. They need to eat regular amounts of carbohydrate throughout the day. They need to have at least 3 meals a day. They need to eat plenty of carbohydrate after training, and following the completion of a game or training, have a proper meal. I mean, I often see it at club level, players train in the evening, they get home, they're too tired to have anything to eat, they crash out to bed or have a couple of beers and go to bed, and of course next day they're feeling tired, find it very hard to train. So an important part of a training program, and perhaps the coach could look at doing it at a club level, is providing a light meal, bananas, some of the commercially available supplements to take immediately after training, with the advice to the players to go home and have a decent meal. I think that's the important thing.
Can you tell us a little bit about sport and liquid intake?
There are a number of commercially available sport drinks now, and the All Blacks are currently using Powerade. There's others like Gatorade, and Hawley's put out products. These are all very good products, and I think they're very useful to take in conjunction with ordinary water replacement. I think they have a place mostly after the exercise. The idea of a lot of these isotonic or slightly hypotonic drinks is that they enable the fluid to be absorbed much more easily than if you just had water alone. So they help replace the electrolytes which may be lost in sweating and in participation in sport, and it also enables a better absorption of water too in the post-exercise state. The other important factor at this time of the year for players who are training or playing pre-season games is to have an adequate intake of fluid before, during and after exercise, and especially if players are playing a pre-season game, they need to sort of make up their fluid loss. So the average player after playing a game of rugby this time of year will be 2 or 3 kilograms lighter after the game than before the game. They need to drink 2 or 3 litres of fluid before they start having some of the sponsors' products. That's very important. Alcohol is very enjoyable, but it's a diuretic, and by that I mean it actually makes you more dehydrated than you were before. So it's not the ideal thing to have when you're dehydrated. Drink your sports drinks, water, and then get into alcohol when you're fully hydrated and passing lots of urine.
What about vitamins and supplements for rugby players?
I often get asked by patients and players, do they need to take extra vitamin and mineral supplements to help their performance? There are 2 issues here: that the average New Zealand diet is very high in vitamins, protein and minerals, and the average New Zealander doesn't need to supplement that. There is also prevailing wisdom that players think if they take more vitamins, their performance will be enhanced. Unfortunately, that's not true. There's no evidence that taking extra vitamins will improve your performance. And I know a number of players like taking their Barocca tablets or having vitamin B12 injections and things like that. There's unfortunately no medical evidence to back that up. The only evidence that vitamin B and C, and to a certain extent vitamin E, may be useful in players who are playing at high altitude, and there's some evidence that if you take vitamins C and E for their antioxidant effect, they may help you in the first week of playing at altitude. And that's not going to be an issue for the average rugby player in New Zealand, but it may be an issue for the teams who are playing in the Super 10 or All Black teams. But as a generalisation, there's no need for extra vitamin supplementation.
What message would you give to players and coaches regarding fluid intake, diet and supplements?
The message I would give to coaches and to players is that the diet they should be having is what we as New Zealanders should be having. They should be having at least 3 good meals a day. They shouldn't be skipping breakfast. That's a vitally important meal. Often on All Black tours and other rugby tours, I see players skipping breakfast. They'd rather have an extra half an hour in bed before they go to training. It's very important if you're doing a training session in the morning that you eat beforehand. So you've got to have breakfast. You may want to supplement that with a morning tea after training. You may then have to have a light lunch and an evening meal. So 3 meals supplemented with perhaps morning, afternoon teas and a supper. The average diet should be high in carbohydrate, which I've talked about before with the cereals, the bread, the pasta, etc. You need to have an adequate fluid intake. After exercise, should be taking some form of carbohydrate, banana or the commercially available supplements, and make sure before you go to the club rooms and indulge in some of the sponsors' products that you're well hydrated first with water or one of the commercially available sports drinks like Powerade.
The silky skills of former All Black centre Bruce Robinson will long be remembered. But nowadays, Bruce heads the coaching division of one of New Zealand's most successful unions, Auckland. Bruce's special contribution to the rugby workshops is his expertise in imparting the knowledge of individual skills and drills.
Right, skills drills are an important part of any rugby training session. They should involve all players, they should be relevant to the game that you're playing, they should be enjoyable. In this segment of the rugby workshops, I'll cover opposed and unopposed passing drills. Firstly, let's look at basic passing and receiving techniques. Key points to remember when passing are: keep good balance, look at the receiver when releasing the ball, and pass accurately to the target. The key points to remember when receiving are: keep behind the passer, make a target with two hands, catch the ball in two hands, realign if necessary. To extend the players, increase the running speed. Secondly, let's look at a drill which is based on running straight, passing and supporting. Key points in this exercise are to run straight with the ball in the hands, support outside the ball carrier, and communicate with the passer. To extend players, reduce the size of the grid. This third drill looks at passing, which includes defenders. In this example, the three defenders should mark one-on-one, leaving an overlap. Key points for the attacking players are: commit their defender, pass accurately, and support the ball carrier. Here are other variations to this drill. The two outside defenders can move forward towards their opposing players. The third defender can mark either the third or the fourth attacker. In this example, the defender has committed himself wide too early, allowing the attacker to dummy and penetrate. Another variation is to allow the defence to choose their own pattern. Good passing. This last drill is designed to develop the player's decision-making skills under pressure. Initially, the first two defenders must mark up one-on-one. The third defender must round a marker 10 metres behind him before joining the defence. A variation is to allow the second defender to decide who he marks and to introduce a halfback to make the initial pass. To extend players, close the gap between attackers and defenders. As a coach, you can modify these drills to meet your training needs.
All the skills in the world are not going to mean a lot if you, the coach, and your players, particularly the team captain, don't know the rules of the game. Dave Bishop and referees laws expert Riley Bell now discuss and explain some law changes and look at rules that players and coaches had problems with last season.
Hi, I'm Dave Bishop, International Rugby Referee, and with me I have Riley Bell from the New Zealand Rugby Referees Association and also a member of the New Zealand Rugby Football Union Laws Committee. In these series of programs on rugby coaching, we want to be looking at areas of the law such as scrums, lineouts, rucks, mauls and even offside, with a view to helping you, the coach and the player, being a little bit better in how you are able to understand the laws of the game and put them in practice to give you and your players a lot more enjoyment and a lot more satisfaction in playing the game. Now, we're going to be dealing with these over these next 5 or 6 segments, but in the meantime I'd like to start off initially by having a look at some of the law changes which are coming applicable this year. Now, Riley, as a member of the Laws Committee, what are the major effects that are going to take place this year?
Well, Dave, we're happy to say that 1995 there aren't a lot of changes at all, and the main ones really focus on the substitution rules and replacement rules for ordering off and sin bins. Just to run through them very briefly, the domestic laws in New Zealand are from Ranfurly Shield down. There will be no replacements for a player who is ordered off or placed in the sin bin. So essentially, if a man is ordered off or replaced, you're reduced to 14 players.
Well, that's quite a change from last year when we had quite a number of examples and people being rather concerned about the fact that players could be replaced when someone was ordered off or sin bin.
That's right, Dave, and it's fair to say that there's always been the concern of the Laws Committee and the NZRFU about the injury question, and really those problems and the rules put in place were generated by that situation. And that takes me to the exception to the ordering off and sin bin replacement rules, in as much as that when a prop is ordered from the field of play, he will be replaced. So there is one exception. But however, having said that, with that replacement, the captain of the team of which that prop has been sent off then has to nominate another player from that team to go from the field. So that team will still finish up with 14 players regardless, and the fact is that the front row will still be safe because there will be a competent player in the front row.
There's going to be some real pressure now on the front row boys to behave themselves, isn't it? You wouldn't want to be the person who's been told to leave the field, would you?
Absolutely, and we hope that the pressure from within the team, in fact, will curb enthusiasm from front row players to get involved in foul play. Otherwise, it may be them who sit on the sideline and have to watch out a game, which would be a great shame.
Well, after all, you know, rugby's all about discipline, isn't it? And it's all about self-discipline, and that's really what we want to see in the game.
Indeed, and maturing that through to team discipline as well. And so it is. We hope that it will improve things, and that the players will accept in the spirit that it's meant.
Now, there is quite a change to the law in regards to substitution of players at the under 21 and below this year, isn't there, Riley?
Right. Essentially, the under 21 rules, and we need to stress that this applies only to under 21, are entitled to substitute players instead of, as well as replacing players. So we need to just be clear in our mind the difference between the two. A replacement player will come on to replace an injured player. He's a permanent replacement. A substitute is giving another guy a game. So the rules are this, that a team in the under-21 competition will have 21 players, of which 15 will be on the paddock at any one time. I think that's the simplest way to put it. The other point about it is that only one playing position, that is open side flank, can be substituted once, and the winger can be substituted once. You can't substitute the winger 6 times during the course of a match. And the other point to make about substitutions is that when you're doing a substitution, they must be done when you have possession and the game is stopped. So that if you have that scrum, the game is stopped and you have that scrum, then you may make a substitute with the referee's approval.
So the player who's being substituted will come on, report to the referee saying,
exactly.
I'm taking the place of player number 14.
Exactly.
And that's why. I think that's a great move because it's going to ensure that all players in the team at least get the opportunity of playing every Saturday.
That's what it's aimed for, Dave. That's what it's aimed.
That's a tremendous thing. And of course, that player who has been replaced, he can be used as a replacement player later in case someone is injured. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah. So he, if he's fortunate enough, he might even get 2 chances at a run.
That's true, but he may only come back on for an injured player.
For an injured
he
player.
may not substitute. The other point that perhaps we should touch on just while we're there is that the rules applying to the blood bin and injury in New Zealand have not changed. That is, anybody who has blood on his person or an open wound must leave the field of play, and anybody who requires attention for an injury must leave the field of play. He may be replaced for 10 minutes. And if after 10 minutes that player's not back on the field of play, that replacement becomes permanent. Once again, with the referee's approval, he may not come on and off the field willy-nilly.
I understand that replacement can only occur for the blood bin on one occasion.
On one occasion.
So if the player receives a further injury or further bleeding from, say, his nose or his head or something, then that he cannot be replaced.
Right.
If he is, it is a permanent replacement.
Yes,
is that
indeed.
correct?
That's
Yes.
correct.
Yeah. In the case of substitutions of any form throughout the game, Riley, there's obviously some certain criteria that have got to be met and must be applied to, isn't there?
That's right, Dave. The main thing to remember for all players is that they may not come onto the field, whether they're substitute, replacement for an injured player, without the permission of the match referee and when the game is stopped. At provincial level or representative level, if the players do go up the grades, there is invariably a reserve touch judge on the sideline who has the responsibility, delegated responsibility from the match referee to control players going on and off the field. And prior to going on the field at that level, you must get the approval of the reserve touch judge. Otherwise, you're into foul play law and penalty kicks and so on, which we want to avoid.
Yes, that's the point that I think that's really got to be emphasised for the club players, isn't it? Their responsibility to report direct to the referee, so the match referee does know that the replacement has taken place.
That's right. It's the only way he can keep track of who's on the field and who's not.
In my role as Otago's Rugby Referee Development Director, I spend a lot of time with clubs and with schools and coaching areas, and there's always a lot of questions that the coaches want to ask me, and it's quite amazing at times the fact that the number of coaches who have never seen this book,
True.
The law book, the actual laws of the game of rugby football. And you know, I would say to any coach who does have problems in the game, A, obtain through your rugby union the laws of the game, because if you're going to coach the game, you must understand what the laws apply to. And the other area is too that there are always members of the referees associations and all the respective unions throughout the country who would freely give their time to go and talk to coaches, particularly if you've got problems in the game, because at the end of the day, we want to see 30 players out there enjoying themselves, or in the under-21 games, 42 guys getting the opportunity to enjoy themselves, because it's from that the referee gets his enjoyment from the game.
That's great, Dave. The Black Book is the main law book, but the NZRFU Laws Committee this season has produced a players and coaches guide to the laws in a form what we call the Blue Book, which will be available early the part of the 95 season. That is a simplified version of the laws with explanatory notes and supporting comments, which most coaches and players will find extremely helpful, and they will be available through the unions.
Well, Riley, I suppose in the next segments we're definitely going to look very closely at the problems that are associated with the scrum, with the line-out, and there are a few changes in terms of practical application from a coaching point of view in the line-out. The requirements under the tackle law in terms of what the player can do, and more importantly, I think what the tackler must allow the player to do. And offside, and also at rucks and mauls, because these 5 areas are the major areas of concern, not only to referees in the game, but obviously to coaches and players, to ensure that this great spectacle of ours continues to be the great game it is.
It's good, Dave, and we look forward to doing those, and we believe that they are critical areas of the match.
Mount Albert Grammar first 15, and it was a big shock to me, rugby scrums compared to league scrums, and it was quite a big learning curve for that first year. But it's something that you sort of learn quickly, or you get told you're not good enough to be there. Yeah.
And you went on, tell us your progression through from when you started playing rugby.
I played New Zealand secondary schools the following year, in my second year at playing rugby. And then went to Ponsonby, where I played ever since. And I first started playing for Auckland in 1989. It seems a while ago. And played my first game for the All Blacks in 1990. The main job of a prop is really to make sure their scrum ball is secure. There's a lot of other sort of points around the field, sort of in general play, sort of especially in the tight stuff in the second phase. As I say, the key point of propping is the scrum, to make sure that scrum's stable and sets a good platform for the rest of the team to work off.
What about player skills?
I think props, like the rest of the players in the team, have to have general all-round skills. I think the days of props only doing the scrum are sort of long gone. The game's sort of a lot faster now, and all players are expected to have the basic skills. A lot of propping, I think, is mental. I mean, you can do so much physically and still not be a great prop because you haven't got the technique, you haven't learnt the technique, or sometimes your mind's not there. I mean, yeah, when it comes to scrummaging, a lot of it's an attitude of whether you're prepared to sort of come second or not. Yeah.
So, Olo, talk about a message to young New Zealand boys who want to be props. What would you say to them?
I think if you want to be a prop, I think you've got to first, to be a good prop, you've got to really enjoy playing in that position. I mean, it's a lot of hard work, and you might not get all the glory that some of the wingers and flankers get, but I think it's quite a rewarding position.
Have you despaired at the number of times your team has lost or jeopardised its chances of winning by giving away line-out penalties? Do you know how to avoid these penalties? The line-out is such a complex phase of the game. There are so many infringements waiting to happen, so many traps lurking for young players. But the answer is at hand. A specialised rugby line-out coaching video called The First Step has been developed by the New Zealand Rugby Referees Association to coach new and junior referees. It makes an ideal refresher for coaches and players too. This tape is available from the Director of Referees Development at the New Zealand Rugby Football Union.
Welcome to The First Step, a coaching video on the line-out for new and junior referees. This training video has been produced to give examples of the basic requirements of the line-out and has endeavoured to show common infringements. It's been designed to give the referee a better understanding of the line-out. The line-out is a complex phase of the game with many penalisable infringements and requirements. If the basics are able to be recognised and acted upon, the rest of the infringements and requirements will be learned as the referee gains experience and a better understanding of the laws and the game. Crossing the line of touch before jumping for the ball. This should not occur provided the 1 metre gap is maintained until the ball leaves the player's hand. Common offside offences. The immediate opponent of the player throwing the ball in must remain within 5 metres of the touchline, retire to the offside line, or join the line-out after the ball has been thrown in 5 metres. One of the most common offside offences is caused by this player advancing over the line of touch before the line-out has ended, or continuing to go further into an offside position and then joining the maul on the opponent's side. The same as in the previous frame, but a close-up of when the player becomes offside and crosses the line of touch and then continues round for the expected tap down from the line-out.
This tape is available from the Director of Referees Development at the New Zealand Rugby Football Union. It's important to get fit for rugby and not to use rugby as a means to get fit or keep fit. A pre-season or summer training program will enable your players to be ready for the season. The program involves 3 areas of fitness: aerobic, strength and conditioning, and flexibility.
If you as a player want to successfully meet the demands of your position and thereby secure your place in the team, it's essential that you prepare yourself properly for the coming season. This means that you have to establish a base of endurance and strength fitness, and basically it's your responsibility to do this. to do this in your own time. Endurance is best achieved by running. There are other activities you can do, but there is no doubt about it, running is the best method of preparation. To do this, you need to train 3 times a week on alternate days. Initially, you should be looking at running for 40 minutes, and the initial objective would be to stay on your feet for 40 minutes. Now, this doesn't mean that you go out there and flog yourself for that amount of time. Just for the first 2 or 3 weeks, make sure that you can actually, in fact, stay on your feet for that 40 minutes, and then gradually increase the pace. By the 8th week, you should be able to, if you are a prop or a lock, cover between 8 to 10 kilometres in that time. If you're in any other position, you should be looking at least at 10 kilometres in that 40 minutes. Now, this is something you've got to gradually progress towards and not try to do initially. The other aspect is strength. Now, strength demands work in the gym. And basically what you're looking at is that the heavier the weight you can lift and the fewer times, the stronger you will get. You should start by working with volume and gradually moving down until you're working with very high, intense type of weights. So working basically on 9 exercises, starting with 3 sets of 12 to 15 repetitions, and doing that for 2 weeks. Within that 2 weeks, if you find it easy to start lifting these weights, then the training weight should be increased. The next 2 weeks, you should decrease the repetitions and increase the weights. And you should be looking then at 3 sets of 10 to 12. The next 2 weeks, again, decrease the repetitions, increase the weights, until you're now onto 3 sets of 8 to 10. And then in the final 2 weeks, you're working with very heavy weights, very close to your maximum, and you get into 3 sets of 6 to 8. Now, doing it in this progressive way will ensure that you'll acquire the maximum strength over the 8 weeks. 2 or 3 things while you are working out with weights. Make sure your technique is always correct. So get someone who knows what they're talking about, who are familiar with the techniques of each exercise, and make sure that he checks your technique. The other thing is always breathe out when you're lifting the weights and breathe in when lowering the weights. The other thing is to remember that you should take twice as long to lower the weights as it does to raise them. This will acquire what is called eccentric strength, and this is extremely important when it comes to starting your acceleration and speed build-up. It also helps to protect potential injury, especially around the knee joint, and is a good introduction towards power work that will come on later. You should spend at least 8 weeks, preferably 12 if you have the time, to acquire high standards in both aerobic endurance and strength. Once you've achieved this, you then move on to a more position-specific type of program, and this is where we start looking at the different demands by different positions.
Every coach holds the responsibility of ensuring that his players are well cared for in this rough and tumble game of ours. Who better to show the skills and items that will quickly put your injured player back on the mend than former All Black physiotherapist Dave Abercrombie.
The medical kits we're going to discuss today, the contents can be found in the Level 1 coaching manuals available from the New Zealand Rugby Football Union. The contents of the kit as it stands, if we look at the necessary items in regards to cutting and looking after special team needs, we have tweezers, we have plaster scissors, tape scissors that can also be used for the cutting of firmer objects such as staples and cardboard and foam. We have smaller, finer scissors for removal of stitches and also for fine tape control. We have spare sprigs with a sprig spanner. We have special dressings such as Duroderm and Compeed for cuts and sterile dressings. We have in the form of Melalite. We also then go to the preparation of the skin prior to putting on the tapes that we use for stabilising ankles and knees, sprains and strains. We use a Leuco spray for preparing the skin, for protecting it and providing an improved adhesion for the tape. We have an antibiotic spray for obvious reasons. We have Optrex for eye washes, and we have a small jar of Vaseline. If we look at the tapes themselves, we use a pre-wrap, which is a foam sponge wrap that protects the skin from the tape in some instances. We have sports strap that can be either 38mm that we tend to use more for ankles and knees. We have 25mm tape that is used more for thumbs, and we have the wrapping tape that we use for extra support and protection in the form of Elastoplast 1003s and 1002s. We go back down to the 10mm sports straps that we use for the support of fingers, and we have the protective smaller overwraps in the form of 25mm soft tapes, and finally a sponge microfoam that we use for protection of blisters and the such like. And finally, we have rubber gloves for the use in people or for people when there have been cuts, and we have exposed skin for protection of both the therapist and the player themselves. These materials are placed in an area within the bowels of the box that we know where everything is, and it's a time to stress to the players involved that the medical kit that's used in a changing room is one that they have to respect. If things are taken out of the box, they need a central person that's controlling what comes and goes so that material goes back in the place that it came from ease of access. There is nothing worse than waiting around and looking for material that you know should be in its place but isn't. Another useful idea is to have the emergency telephone numbers of your local hospital, ambulance service, general practitioner and possibly rugby club down on the lid of your box so that players and coaches have these numbers in case of an emergency. From there we can slip the top compartment in that we then will have a look at the contents that go into that. We have a variety of small plasters, from the finger dressings to small skin closures for cuts that may not need surgical closure. We have Compeed dressings for the sterile dressings again. We have Remove, which is a product for taking away the residues of tapes once the tape has been removed from the joints. We have some more sock tape or insulation tape. We have a couple of pens, one of them a marker pen for marking clothing that people always seem to need. We have a small screwdriver, a sewing kit for the button that goes missing if you're on tour. We have another small pair of fine tweezers. We have finger and nail clippers and one for the toes. We have a shaver for preparing the skin. We have a small self-resuscitation unit for protection of the caregiver. We have a finger splint, a small torch. We have the Voltaren Emu gel. We have a small little container that we have spare valves for pumps, a variety of which, as well as clips and pins. We have a little Panadol for those with decongestant problems. We have Vicks. We have a Drixine nasal spray. We have some anti-inflammatory throat lozenges and some Sudafed, all of which are available from your chemist. We have also the antiseptic hydrogen peroxide, some Sofradex for the sterile ear and eye drops, and finally the Savlon antiseptic cream. The on-field medical kit is a specially designed bum bag done by USL, which has special compartments for ease of access and storage of the tapes and bits and pieces needed for emergency on-field treatments. In the top compartment we have the inhaler, we have smelling salts, a much smaller pair of tape scissors and some black tape. If we go through to the second layer, we have this specially set up for the treatment of cuts. We have a variety of plasters, sterile dressings. We have 2 different types of tape, transport and a much softer head tape, a small finger tape that can then be used in conjunction with the soft dressings for compressing and covering any wounds that might occur. In this area we also have a couple of spare sprigs and a sprig spanner for the situation when a player needs those items. In the bottom compartment we have the larger 1002 or 1003 elastoplast dressings. We have another variety of bandages. There is a situation that arises when you're maybe on the opposite side of the field to where your major medical kit will be, and you need to have these things available. We might have a different sort of turbohaler for those that suffer asthmatic problems. We have a small vial of Vaseline and again a little bit more black tape that we can pop down there. These smaller emergency type items can be replenished once you return to the sideline, where it is advisable to keep the larger medical kit with the majority of your medical supplies. The following items can be kept in a sideline ice bag for the treatment of the sprains and bruises. They are a toweling ice bag that crushed ice can be kept in with a Velcro seal on it. You may have something in the form of flexi ice, which can be kept in the bag but has been frozen prior to a game. And then we have a variety of elastic compression bandages that are all available from a pharmacy or from your local medical supply outlet such as USL. The one bandage I like to use for the compression bandaging on the field is a stretch bandage with a Velcro tape at the end that saves the need for taping up with elastic tape or using safety pins. We have a variety of foams that can be cut in this manner that we have for an ankle compression pad, and these will help control the swelling on certain joints. This medical kit that you have seen may be a lot more complicated